Hi there, I'm back again 15 times later. I'm having lots of trouble with my computer and my phone and camera and everything else, and the lighting, everything, and I don't have an editing software yet, so I will try this one again. So this is a talk about Alzheimer's, and I wanted to talk about that because I think it's one of those conditions or diseases or whatever that it's so misunderstood. Now, I started working in care when I was 16, and my first experience was working in a nursing home for my Duke of Edinburgh, and they threw me straight in at the deep end, and I walked in the door at 16 years old and said, "What do I do?" And the matron said, "Go and take that old man to the toilet." So that was my first ever experience in care. And I remember being really mortified and embarrassed and really shy and awkward, but I did it anyway. And after that, I got used to doing stuff. So I've done the personal care and everything. And when you've done it a few times, it just becomes second nature and you don't even think of it. Nurses and doctors and all that see everything. So there's no secrets, do you know what I mean? So physically you see everybody in all the nakedness when you work in care, and it's just part of life and you don't think anything of it. But when you're working with Alzheimer's, you're going into their mind as well, so it becomes not just a physical care but also a psychological one. And because I analyse everything and everyone, I see the world in a different way. So this is my view of Alzheimer's. I got told when I went there that I had to do NVQ 1, 2, 3 so that I could get an understanding of care. But what I found is that there are people like me who don't need a qualification, because you see things for yourself and you work things out for yourself and you understand people on a different level anyway, so you don't need to be told how to care for someone because you already do and you already understand them. So I understand that everyone's got their own quirks anyway, and some people are eccentric and some people are withdrawn, some people are very straight, and we've all got our own ways and our personalities. With Alzheimer's, what I got to experience was the other side of that person. So when those people came into the care home, their families had basically had them admitted because they'd got to a point where they just could not cope anymore, because when you get moderate Alzheimer's, that's when you need 24-hour care, because you just lose yourself so much that you have no concept of time or anything, and or danger or personal care or anything like that. So when you get to that level, that's when the family needs to be 24-hour care. I think I'm going to do this video in 2 parts, by the way, because I think I'm going to talk too much about this, because I have got so much to say about Alzheimer's, and it's actually very interesting, and I'm also very controversial because my view of people and things is not the mainstream view. And so when I look at people, I look at them in a holistic way. And if somebody's acting up or acting out, I always think, what's behind that, and why are you doing that? And if it seems illogical, then to me there's always some reason why, like a past trauma or something like this. So I think I will do this in 2 parts, and it takes the pressure off trying to condense it. So first of all, my first view of Alzheimer's was, these people have come full circle in their life, and they've got to a point where the time has just stood still. So let's pretend I've got a chart here and we live in something called linear time. So it's a straight line. So on this side of life, if you like, where we're in our human existence, we live by the clock and by calendars. So we are born, and then we have our childhood, then teens, young adulthood, middle age, old age. And a normal healthy person who keeps all the faculties till the very end will have what I would call linear time, so that they just go from one place to the other and it's a straight line. But I think that people who've got Alzheimer's get to the old age but they stick, so they don't go beyond that mentally. So if they'd have lived 10 years with moderate Alzheimer's, say, they'll stay where they got, if that makes sense. But what happens is their mind will start to go back here and it will go there on the timeline, and it will move up and down and stick somewhere, and then they'll get stuck at an event, and it could be anywhere, and sometimes those people would go back to the same events. So this is where I would say I would consider myself a little bit controversial, because people say the mind starts to have glitches, the brain itself gets eaten away with Alzheimer's and dementia, and so all the motor neurons and everything start to malfunction, so it affects your bodily functions, your thought process, your behaviour, your speech. It affects you in every single way, because the brain is the control centre of the body. And so my understanding of Alzheimer's is the brain is like a computer, and if you get a virus on a computer, then it malfunctions and it starts to do stuff like my phone has got a malfunction on it because it's got a virus, I think, and I've got a new one to replace it with. But what happens with my phone is it'll just start talking to itself. It's like it'll just start scrolling through the internet, and then it'll pick up on something and then bring it up, and I'm not even touching the screen, and it basically has its own mind. It just does what it wants. And I think Alzheimer's does the same thing to people, because you lose control of your mind, so it'll go where it wants to go. Now this morning I also had a thought about this. I'm going to do another video about this as well, and I'm going to write that down while I remember. But PTSD and insomnia, I think, are linked as well, and I'll say why in another video. So basically what I discovered with Alzheimer's was these people were reliving memories in real time, and it was something that wasn't understood even by the professionals, because they would say to me, oh no, you don't understand, they've gone into this fantasy and they're just acting out a fantasy because they've lost the marbles type thing. And I'm like, after observing people for a long time, I've come to the conclusion that these people are actually reliving old memories. And I've got so many examples, but I'll use a couple. There was one lady, I'll call her Barbara, absolutely lovely woman. I loved her to bits, very smart, very, very physically fit, but she had Alzheimer's. And she was so smart because she outwitted everybody constantly, and you could see it that her mind was always thinking, I've got to get 2 steps ahead of here. So what she would do is, for this, the way that I met her was the day that I started at the unit. And I walked to the door to open it to go onto the unit, and you were given a code to get in because they keep the doors locked, and it's for a good reason. I open the door and I see this lady come to the door, and she's dressed all smart with a coat on, and she's got an umbrella, and I opened the door. She grabbed the door from the other side and went, oh thank you darling, have a lovely day, and walked past me. Next thing I hear, Barbara, Barbara, and all the staff come running. She's a resident, and what she used to do is sit there with her smart clothes on, and she sort of knew when it was going to be like visiting time, and she would sit at the end of the corridor and watch the door. And because it had a glass panel in it, you could see the people coming to the door. So when she saw someone come to the door, like a visitor, she'd get up and run to the door and then pretend to be a visitor. And she was really smart like that. And she outwitted them a lot because she'd often run to town and it'd be like a 10-minute run. But she was so quick because she was a PE teacher in the war. So she still had a lot of physical fitness. I was just having some coffee. So she was really good, right? And that's how I met her. So straight away I thought, I like this woman. She's smart, you know. One of the timelines that she went on her timeline, she would go back to her 20s and she'd stick at a certain scenario. And this scenario that she got stuck on was where she literally was in the war. And because she was a PE teacher and that, she was physically fit, but she must have also been a trainer of some description, because I went to her level where she was, and I always do this. So if you go back to you being 5 years old or you being 20 years old and you're in this scenario, then I will go with you to that scenario rather than tell you that it's not real. I will go there and play a role in there. And they do respond to this. And so what she would do is train me to watch out. So she'd make me, when I'm saying this, it's funny, isn't it? She would go under a table in the dining room and go down like this, and then she'd go shh, and then she'd tell me to do the same. So I'd just copy it and do it, right? And she loved it. And then she'd say, roly-poly over to the other table. So she'd do a roly-poly and go under another table and then tell me to do it. So I would just do what she told me. And what she was trying to do is help us escape. She was smart. So she'd do a roly-poly under all the tables until she got to the door. And then she'd lay on the floor or stand by the door and just peep out. And if there was no one there, she'd go, right, run. So then we'd run down the corridor and hide somewhere else. And it was a game, right? But I became aware, after doing this game for a few times, it actually wasn't a game to her. She wasn't role-playing and she wasn't acting out like a child does when a child plays. She was actually there. She was there in that situation. And the reason I know she was there is because her whole body reacted to it. So it was like real. So that part of the game was fun to me because I could see who she was when she was that age. So when she was in her 20s, I could see what she was like in her 20s and her character and everything. And she was a very strong woman and very, I wouldn't say serious because she had a light side to her as well, but she was, I don't know, professional, whatever, you could tell. And the other staff used to look at me and go, why are you doing that? That is weird. Why are you rolling on the floor with her and doing stuff like that? And I said, well, because she is there. She really is there. She's not playing a game, she's really there. So I'm just pretending I'm with her and she accepts that I'm part of that scenario and helps me to join in with it. And it helps her. She loved it. But they thought I was weird. And I thought they was weird because to me, that's a logical thing to do. You know, if somebody's got a mental disability and they don't go beyond a 7-year-old, then you treat them as a 7-year-old. You know, that's just, to me, a logical thing. But these people who were more trained and qualified than me did not understand that concept with an older person. And I remember sitting with relatives and talking with them, and they'd say stuff like, just don't understand, you know, my mum's not the person she was. And it's only a recent thing I thought, what you're seeing now is the person she used to be before you knew her. So the person before you were born even. So if your mum has gone back to her childhood or her early marriage years or anywhere on the timeline before you were born, then you're actually seeing who she actually really was back in the day. And when we recite a story to our children and tell them a memory that we have, we can normally do it without too much emotion because we're detached from it now. So you can tell a story, you might get choked up doing it, it might get to you sometimes and you go, oh my gosh, that's just really got to me. But with Alzheimer's, you don't just think about the memory, you are the memory, and you go back there, and it's like your brain is a supercomputer and we are like an animation almost, and it's like everything around us appears to be real. And so when we're in a situation, we sense, smell, feel, hear, we have all our senses on high alert, and we're aware of everything around us, and it's real. It's real to us. And like I said, in a normal situation, if you recite a memory that was traumatic, you can get to a point where if you tell the story enough, you can say it without too much emotion because you've detached yourself from that situation. But they can't do that. So this lady called Barbara had two main storylines that she would go back to, and it was like the glitch. Her brain would just take her back there and stick there. And the other one was a very sad one, and it was very distressing for her. And again, I had no training at all, but I just sort of knew what to do. And what happened is, in the 1980s, her only child went backpacking in Australia, and he got killed. And he never came home, obviously. And she got stuck on the timeline of where she was waiting on the news. So when she went back in this timeline with her Alzheimer's, she never got to that place where she just got the bad news. So what she had was that mother's instinct of something is wrong with my child, I can feel it in my bones, something's not right. And so she went to that place and got stuck there. And what the other staff would do is just say, just leave her to it. She always comes round in a few hours. She's all right and that. But I observed her the first time and watched, and it really upset me because what happened is her whole body went back to that time. So she was hyperventilating. She was distressed. She had sweat coming down on her face. She was wringing her hands. She was clinging on to people, begging them for help. And she's saying, I know something's wrong. I know my son. I know there's something wrong with him. And I don't know what it is. And she'd be having panic attacks. Imagine that yourself. If you was in that situation right now, that is how we would behave, right? So she was there. It wasn't even a memory. It wasn't a memory to her. It was, I am there now. And so I thought, right, I'm observing and I can see that she's not got to that point where she's found out that he's died, so she doesn't know at this point. So the staff said, leave her alone. It takes a few hours and then she comes down. And I thought, that is cruel, because if somebody was in absolute raving agony and they were rolling on the floor screaming and crying, and I had a shot of morphine that could take away that pain, then I would give them the morphine. I wouldn't say, well, they're only going to be in agony for a few hours, so just let them get on with it. I would want to ease that pain. So this is why I was seen as being controversial, because I thought, this, to me, that doesn't sit right with me, that you should let somebody suffer, because she's already gone through it once. And by the time I'd gone to work there, she'd gone through it probably 10 times, 20, 30, 40 times, because she'd been in that home for a number of years when I got there. And if they were just sitting there watching her do that and watching her suffer, then that doesn't sit right. So what I did, I'd already read her notes when I was doing one of my night shifts, and it said that what they did in this notebook is they'd say something about the person, like what made them smile, what food they liked, what their routines was like. And on this list it said that she liked black magic chocolate. And I figured, well, if her son was in his 20s when he died, there'll have been a point in his life that he'll have given his mum black magic chocolate for Christmas, Mother's Day or Easter or something like that. So I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go with her to that time that she's stuck in, where she's distressed and she's crying and she can't take no more of it. And I thought, I'm going to join her in this place, because you can kind of interact with them there as well. And so I went along, and I went up to her and I went, Barbara, you're never going to guess what, you're never going to guess what. And she's like, what? Oh God. And I said, I've got some news about your son. And I told her his name. And she went, what? I just know it. And then she burst out crying and she said, I know he's gone in it. And I went, no, you've got it all wrong. And she's like, what? And I said, he isn't gone, he's alive, he's fine. And she went, what? No, she said, I said, no, honestly, I have just spoken to him on the phone. So I lied to her, but I did it convincingly, and I said, no, I have just spoken to him on the phone, and I know it was him, because he phoned me and he asked for Barbara. That's you, that's your name. And she went, right. And I said, you're his mum. And I said, and he told me to tell you that he went backpacking in Australia. And she went, yeah, that's where he is. I said, he got lost in the mountains, but he's fine. Listen, what happened is he got lost and there was no phone nowhere, and he couldn't tell you that he was lost, and he felt really upset because he knew you'd be upset. And what happened is, he managed to find a phone, and he phoned me and he told me to tell you that he's fine and he's coming home. He's getting on the aeroplane and he's coming home, and he's bringing you some black magic. And as soon as I said that, she went, pfft, and she went, oh, thank you, God. And it took her a few minutes to come down. But do you know what? Within a few minutes, she came out of it. She came straight out of it, because I gave her good news and I told her that he was fine. And I was lying, but she didn't know. And I did it for her. And everybody who was sat watching me went, there's something wrong with you. And I went, why? And they went, why would you lie to her like that? And I said, no, why would you tell her that her son's been dead for 30 years? Why would you do that to her? Why would you do that to a mother who's already gone through the grief process, who's already gone through all the trauma of that? And now you keep reminding her that he's been dead for how long? And they do this all the time. And you get somebody who would go back in to like when they just had a child, because it's a memory that's really intense, and they'd get stuck there. And you'd get like an 85-year-old woman going, where's my baby? Where's my baby? I can't find my baby. So I would automatically say, oh, don't worry, I've took her for a little sleep. I took her for a walk in pram so you could have a rest. Oh, lovely, they'd say. No, you're over it straight away. But the other people would just sit there and go, your baby's 50 years old now. She's 50, she's not a baby. And they do that, and I'm like, if you've been trained, you're not getting the right training, because this is ridiculous now. I remember once the duty manager calling me into her office, and she said, I want to ask you a question. She said, I want to know why I went into this lady's room this morning and she was laid on her bed talking to George at the wall, which she always did. She was stuck in this place, right? And she said, and you were sat on a chair next to that bed looking at the wall, talking to the wall with her, and I want to know why you did that. And I said, because I was with her. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, I was there with her. I said, you tell me what she's doing. And this lady had been in the nursing home for 2 years. And the matron who'd been there for 10 years didn't know what she was doing. She said, she's rambling and she's talking to the wall. I went, no, she's not. I said, she's 5 years old and she's in the school playground. And George is her friend. George is the little boy who pulls her pigtails and steals a brolly from her and throws a tennis ball around the playground and winds her up. And it upsets her sometimes. And she tells me about George, and then I tell him off and say, that's enough now, George, be kind to Edith. And then he gives her the ball back in her head, and then she's fine and happy. I said, I can sit with her all day and be in that world with her and interact with her where she is on her timeline. And the matron just looked at me, the manager and that, and she just looked at me like my lights had gone out, and she said, wow. And I says, what I don't understand is why you lot don't interact with them where they are. And she said, because they're delusional, you don't understand. She said, they're in a different place, it's a disease. I said, it could be a disease, but their brain has gone back to somewhere in time and got stuck there for that time, and their bodies took that role on. They are actually there. They are there. It's like a glitch. It's almost like time travel, you know. Your body stays the same, but your mind has gone back to a place in time, and you relive that place. And if you sit with these people and get to know them, you can find out things about the past. It's like they are literally walking historians, and they'll tell you what actually was happening, and you can tell just by the emotion. So if somebody goes back to like a time like when the partner died, for example, then you go back to their time of grief, and you can see how they grieved in the past. And it's like, you know, I can relate to you because you're going back to an age where I am now, and I can see the person you was at my age. You know, your body might be old, but your mind has gone back to being this age group. And I found it really actually fascinating, and I loved working with Alzheimer's. I found it stressful sometimes, and I'll do another video later about that, called whistleblowing. And it was only ever stressful for me because of the staff, not the residents. So I will do a video on that, because I blew the whistle many times, and I was hated so badly that I had no friends at work. Only the residents and their families. They loved me. Everyone else hated me because I was a big mouth, and I outed stuff. But the one thing about dementia to me is, and Alzheimer's, it's kind of the same but different, if that makes sense. With Alzheimer's, it's a slow progression, so you could have it in your 40s, 50s, and not be really aware of it until you get later on in life. And then it gets to a point where it becomes noticeable, and then people normally end up in the care home when it's at a moderate stage, because that's when you start forgetting things, like you might go and put the cooker on and just put the gas and walk away and leave the gas on. Or you might just think you're going for a walk, but you haven't got dressed, so you're naked and you're walking down the road, and then you forget where your house is and stuff like that. So that's when you tend to start the wandering, and then people start to get like incontinent and stuff like that. So that's when it becomes difficult. I remember asking, why are there no Asians in a nursing home? And no one had even thought about it, and they went, well, we don't know. And I went, it's not that they don't get Alzheimer's, because we're all human and everyone gets the same stuff, you know. So they obviously get it, but why don't they ever come in a nursing home? And then it clicked why. And I said, I get it. It's because they live like we used to live. So they live multi-generationals in one family. So they've got the grandparents, the parents, the children and the grandchildren all live in one house, and that's how they live. And that's how we used to live a couple or so generations back. And now we've become nuclear. So we're all separated from each other, even within our own families. So if our family member gets Alzheimer's, it's normally down to one